Honorable Minister for Power and Corporate Affairs, Dr. M. Veerappa Moily, Chairman, Governing Council of TERI, Dr. R. Ramachandran, Director General TERI and Chairman of the IPCC, Dr. R.K. Pachauri, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It is both an honor and a privilege for me to be here today amongst you to deliver the 11th Darbari Seth Memorial Lecture. I am acutely aware of the prestige and the dignity attached to this event, and also to the eminence of those who have preceded me. I deem it especially fortuitous and memorable for me because I am delivering this lecture in the presence of Dr. Moily. He is not only my minister, but in very many ways my mentor. In him I found a truly humane person whose belief in CSR and sustainability is completely sincere, honest, and straightforward. His conviction and commitment to the cause of social upliftment and inclusion is deeply ingrained in his DNA, and I must confess that I am deeply influenced by his thoughts and his ideals. I am also acutely conscious of the fact that TERI, under whose aegis this event is being organized, is itself an extraordinary pioneer on the issues of climate change and sustainability. Under the dynamic and iconic leadership of Dr. Pachauri, the voice of TERI has resounded through every important corridor of the world. And with great name and fame has also come great responsibility. It is a matter of great pride for every Indian that today TERI's wisdom and foresight is respected throughout the world. As the Director General of the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, I am aware that many of our aims and objectives are common and therefore need to be commonly pursued. The legislative developments that are about to unfold cast a heavy responsibility on the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs in the area of sustainability and CSR. I am therefore very happy to announce today that in the very near future, TERI and the IICA will join hands in a partnership that will drive our mutual agenda forward. In an MOU that is presently under preparation, we are contemplating inter alia the preparation of sustainable development indices and the rolling out of a viable as well as credible sustainability reporting framework for our country. The theme that I have chosen for today's lecture, Sustainable Futures, Corporate Imperatives for Managing the Social Agenda, is one that I know was equally close to the heart of the legendary Darbari Seth. He, above all, was acutely aware of how much business enterprises take from society. He, above all, was also aware of how imperative it was for corporates to give back to that very same society. It was for this reason that he pioneered and launched several initiatives of social relevance and national importance. His philosophy was summed up in his own words. I have always been mission-driven and not ambition-driven. To me, my country and my people come first. I always want to be at the giving end and not at the receiving end. I give joyfully and give until it hurts. This philosophy of giving is now at the very heart of the way that corporates are looking at, and if I may say so, being made to look at the conduct of their business. In our collective dream of a sustainable future and sustainable livelihoods, which is indeed the theme of my talk today, all the three players, government, corporates, and civil society, will have to play roles that are interconnected and interdependent. The recently concluded Plus 20 Rio Summit has strongly stressed this in its outcome document. In the part where the common vision of the future is addressed, the document says, and I quote, "We acknowledge that the implementation of sustainable development will depend on the active engagement of both the public and the private sectors. Thus, the message from Rio is quite clear. While governments undertake extensive development initiatives through a series of sectoral programs, the business sector must come forward and take responsibility. Corporates must be impelled to adopt socially responsible practices that enrich, empower, and enlighten the communities with whom they engage. By exhibiting socially, environmentally, and ethically responsible behavior, businesses can generate value and long-term sustainability for themselves, while at the same time making positive contributions to the betterment of society." It is in this context that the Indian government has for some time now been engaged with the corporate sector, both public and private, in evolving an enabling environment. Such an environment needs to synergize and unleash the positive energies of all the members of the triad: corporates, government, and civil society. Contemporary history tells us that the first initiative emanated from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in a set of guidelines issued in December of 2009. The ministry called upon business entities to formulate CSR policies as integral parts of their overall business policies. However, the very nature of this initiative was pioneering. Therefore, it was more in the nature of an appeal or an exhortation. Still, it stimulated the underlying belief that government had created a platform on which a host of players could come forward and partner. The second path-breaking initiative emerged from the Department of Public Enterprises, which brought out the guidelines on CSR for central public sector enterprises on the 9th of April 2010. The DPE followed this up a year later with the guidelines on sustainable development for CPSEs. These efforts were of enormous significance because they committed a sector that accounts for about 12% of our GDP to programs that would directly benefit communities and promote sustainable development. In very rapid succession came the National Voluntary Guidelines. These guidelines, released on the 8th of July 2011, were formulated keeping in view the diverse sectors within which businesses operate, as well as the wide variety of business organizations that exist, right from small and medium enterprises to large corporate houses. The latest development in this area, though, is the Companies Bill, about which Dr. Moily just referred. This was introduced in the Lok Sabha on the 14th of December 2011. Soon enough, this bill will become law. Its provisions on CSR are indeed path-breaking and will become a benchmark for the rest of the world. Let us, for the benefit of this audience, quickly recall at some of the very, very important features that the company's bill talks of with respect to CSR. Every company having a net worth of 500 crores or more, or a turnover of 1,000 crore or more, or a net profit of 5 crore or more, shall constitute a CSR committee of the board, consisting of 3 or more directors, one of whom must be an independent director. Second, that this committee shall formulate and recommend to the board a CSR policy, the activities to be undertaken, the amount of expenditure to be incurred, and will also monitor the CSR policy of the company from time to time. Third, that the board will approve the CSR policy of the company, disclose the contents of such policy, prepare a report and place it on the company's website. Fourth, the board of every such company shall ensure that the company spends in every financial year at least 2% of the average net profits of the company on CSR. And finally, fifth, if the company fails to spend such amount, the board shall specify the reasons for not spending this amount in a report which will not only come up on its website but will also be filed with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. The above provisions pose indeed many daunting challenges and provoke many serious questions. Let me pose one or two of them for you to perhaps contemplate and mull over. What is the government's definition of CSR? Which activities will count as admissible CSR activities? How will rupee values be assigned? How will measurable indicators be designed? In accounting terms, what will qualify as debitable to CSR expenditure? If one goes by the national voluntary guidelines, then unfortunately, most of the principles are neither measurable nor can they be assigned with rupee values. How can one say that a company's human rights record deserves 3 out of 5? Or that the ethics of company X is worth 100 rupees? Hence, a completely new paradigm has to be developed. The rules under the Act have to be framed with great care. Corporate India has to be provided with a clear roadmap. Along with this, a massive awareness and capacity building program will need to be launched on a pan-India basis. The task is enormously challenging and has to be addressed with great care and caution, not to mention sensitivity. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs is fully seized of this and is putting in place mechanisms that will help to roll out both a practical and a meaningful agenda. To this end, again under the leadership of our Honourable Minister, the IICA has already held 3 major national conclaves. India has been experiencing a consistently high growth rate during the post-liberalization period following the implementation of economic reforms in the early 1990s. It has achieved excellence in several key areas ranging from information technology and pharmaceuticals to automotive parts, and is now considered one of the fastest growing economies of the world. Despite these positive developments, India is still among the countries with some of the lowest indicators of human development. The levels of malnutrition, illiteracy, and poverty are still unacceptably high. The rise in income inequalities and regional disparities is also a matter of concern. Employment has grown, but the jobs created are not always of high quality. Although there has been an expansion in several social services like health and education, the quality of many of these services remains poor, particularly in rural areas. And above all, an overwhelming majority of the population is deprived of basic social protection. Policymakers are thus faced with a paradox. The persistence of deprivation and increasing insecurities among a large section of the population amidst growing affluence and prosperity for some. What makes the whole new endeavor of ushering in an era of concerted CSR especially difficult is that there are no precedents anywhere in the world. India is embarking on a solitary mission that will set benchmarks and establish altogether new credentials. For this experiment to succeed, we will need the commitment and understanding of the business world, the expertise and watchfulness of civil society and social entrepreneurs, and of course a highly enlightened and enabling regulatory framework to be provided by government. If these work in tandem, then India stands on the threshold of an age in which the united strengths will be harnessed to provide for its people a significantly better quality of life than ever before. The past 3 decades, since the 80s, have irrevocably altered the relationship between government, businesses, and the world. The world is indeed today far more dependent on businesses than at any time in history. Liberalization and globalization has meant that businesses are pervasive, woven into all spheres of social, political, and economic life. Today, businesses have tremendous reach, cutting across geographies, ethnicities, culture, language, and political boundaries. Straddling a wide spectrum of political systems, businesses have become the key drivers of economic growth, delivery mechanisms for change, and agents of innovation. For many of the formidable challenges that confront us, it is hard to imagine solutions that would be complete without the involvement of businesses. Whether businesses like it or not, boardroom discussions of the next quarter's targets and profits must somehow make space for strategies that address, in however small a way, some of the burning issues that stare us in the face. The concept of the triple bottom line in the business paradigm suggests that business goals are inseparable from the society and the environment within which they operate. A failure to account for social and environmental impacts would make businesses focus on short-term goals unsustainable in the long run. The shift from mere concentration on the financial bottom line to the framework of the triple bottom line is crucial for businesses today. Which is why corporates themselves are becoming increasingly aware of their roles and responsibilities in this changing scenario and are striving to bring a shift in their policies and practices in order to meet their long-term goals. In this context, key stakeholders such as the Government of India, investors, communities and NGOs are calling for greater responsibility, transparency and accountability. At the present time, there is a clear consensus among businesses that proactively managing their social and environmental impact creates a value beyond simply satisfying stakeholders. It has not only helped businesses to recognize and manage risks before they materialize, but also plays a major role in identifying cost savings and efficiency gains, as well as benchmarking best practices. There is yet another vital dimension. Global interconnectivity lets consumer markets constantly grow together. Modern communication technologies accelerate this phenomenon. The brand image as well as the self-perception of any company lies in the hands of millions of people using the social media or their living power. Businesses therefore have to provide what they have taken responsibility for along their entire value chain. Stakeholders across all sectors, regions and segments of society are asking for it. In fact, they are demanding it, and they are tolerating misconduct less and less. The concept of corporate social responsibility has significantly developed from noble promises and mere greenwash towards a management approach and a powerful driver that can build a new, more sustainable 21st century economy. Indeed, a couple of years ago, CSR topics were only a nice-to-have item on many executive floors. It was something dealt with after hours. That has changed for good. Corporate sustainability today is a must-have. Let me draw your attention to a recent survey conducted by the American giant Accenture, which made this point. CEOs around the world are starting to see the shape of a new era of sustainability coming into view. In the face of rising global competition, technological change, and the most serious economic downturn in nearly a century, corporate commitment to the principles of sustainability remains strong throughout the world. 93% of CEOs today see sustainability as important to their company's future success. Indian entrepreneurs and business enterprises have a long tradition of working within the values that have defined our nation's character for millennia. India's ancient wisdom, which is still relevant today, inspires people to work for the larger objective of the well-being of all stakeholders. These sound and all-encompassing values are even more relevant in current times. They act as beacon lights as organizations grapple with the challenges of modern-day enterprise. The aspirations of stakeholders and of citizens eager to be active participants in economic growth and development. Let us also remember that CSR and sustainability can hardly be thought of without the active engagement of civil society actors. Historically, civil society and NGOs have played a limited role in the CSR scenario in India, but they have become increasingly important in recent years. The number of NGOs has grown rapidly and the fresh emergence of civil society actors devoted to CSR issues has allowed NGOs to play a far more significant part. Today, civil society seeks to have greater influence on CSR efforts by one, acting as watchdogs and monitoring business activities, building awareness and advocating change through citizens' action, conducting research, disseminating information, and building awareness of CSR efforts. Then bringing stakeholders together for collaborative action on social issues. And finally, partnering with businesses to implement CSR programs. As we go forward, let us also remember that academic institutions have also played an important role, particularly in generating new ideas for CSR. Much of the thinking on what defines CSR and innovative CSR approaches originated at universities, from the initial concept of corporate social performance to recent ideas of sustainability. Business for what C.K. Prahlad famously termed as the bottom of the pyramid, and the creation of what Michael Porter called shared value. These ideals have shaped how corporations think about their obligations and guided the new design of CSR programs. Finally, think tanks focused on CSR have started to play an important role in expanding the CSR horizon. Organizations such as Sustainability in the UK, EcoSense, and the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany, as well as FSG and Business for Social Responsibility in the US, have amplified the conversation around CSR by debating new ideas, convening stakeholders, and highlighting best practices. Thus, across the globe, there is a groundswell of thought, opinion, and belief that the ills of the world cannot be addressed by state action alone. A multi-pronged, multi-sectoral, and sustained attack must be launched. Unfortunately, we have witnessed in recent times a growing mistrust of corporations and a subsequent loss of credibility. There looms between the people at large and the world of business a huge chasm which we classify as trust deficit. Companies must take the lead in bringing businesses and society back together, says Professor Porter. And he is indeed right. We need an overall framework for guiding these efforts. His belief is that corporate success and corporate responsibility are interdependent. This approach acknowledges trade-offs between profit orientation and social and environmental goals. Only then can trust deficit be converted to a trust surplus. Milton Friedman it was who said famously in 1970 that the business of business is to do business, and that the social responsibility of business is to increase profits. Unfortunately, that no longer holds water. Companies know this, the public knows it, and so do NGOs, regulators, and government. It is no longer good enough to merely tick the compliance box. Companies are expected to come up with products that are good, not just for the bottom line, but good for society. Getting CSR right then is not a journey, but a destination. Corporate leaders face tough decisions with increasing pressures to improve their bottom line and to be good corporate citizens. But we must persevere because the fruits of our labor today will make for a better tomorrow. Every individual in this room has a positive and proactive role to play to fuse a new spirit into the way business is conducted. It was Albert Einstein who once said, "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." We cannot solve tomorrow's challenges with yesterday's thinking. We have a profound need for new consciousness, new thinking, and new concepts. In conclusion, there are two positive suggestions that we can clearly make. The first, that we can improve our capacity to innovate by incorporating the points of view of diverse stakeholders with their diverse needs, aspirations, and priorities. And second, that we can broaden our corporate objectives beyond the economic to include the social and the environmental. The eyes of the world are upon India as it ushers in a new phase of development, assuming a greater role on the global stage. The world's largest democracy, India, has a great deal to teach the world about corporate responsibility. There is no single code or standard, no panacea that will lead us there. Each company is different with its own challenges, its own corporate philosophy, and its unique set of stakeholders and management systems. Corporate responsibility is a journey for which there is no single map, but hundreds of guides. How we navigate, the paths we choose, the partnerships and synergies we develop, the foresight and patience we exhibit, these will determine whether or not we become an example for the world to emulate. But my faith in the Indian genius, in our heritage and in our values, leads me to believe that in this vital field of CSR and sustainability, India will blaze a new and remarkable trail. Thank you.